Hello, Welsh Forest Focus. A busy show ahead as we discuss some pretty eye-watering figures in the Nottingham Forest accounts, the Spurs game being moved at ridiculously short notice, and we'll take your submitted questions in the company of, first of all, Mikey Clarke. Mikey, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. Good evening. Evening, everybody. How are you, Matt? You good?
Good, yeah, good. Not too bad at all. Day off, so that was nice. Well, working now, but can't count this as work, to be fair. And our second guest today is a debutant and another Reds fan, obviously, in Paul Morley. Paul, good to have you with us. You well?
Very well, thank you, Matt. Yeah, very, very privileged to be here and looking forward to a good chat with you both and obviously interacting with the members and their questions.
Yes, good to have everyone with us. As I said, we'll kick off with the accounts and then we'll get into the Spurs game and then we'll take your questions. That's the kind of general running order. The accounts published today obviously show an underlying loss of 62 million, and other figures include 170 million spent on transfers, a wage bill of 147 million. We borrowed 87 million in the year, and TV money was up massively to 125 million to kind of balance that out. So we'll talk around the good and the bad of that. But before we do, I spoke to football finance expert Kieran Maguire earlier today for about 10 minutes just to get his thoughts on the underlying numbers. So Paul and Mikey haven't seen it. I was supposed to email it to Paul, but time got away from me. So they're watching this on the fly like everyone else. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes and then I'll pick the brains of the other lads to see what they think of it. But here's Kieran Maguire, who was very good, by the way, to give his time, because about 15 clubs released their accounts today. So to get any time with him was great. Here we go. Try again. Kieran Maguire, football finance expert of the highest order. It's very good to have you with us. We were just saying before we start recording, this is the busiest day of the year for you. So how are you doing?
I'm surviving. I started on the radio this morning at 7 o'clock. By 9 o'clock, my wife had pointed out to me that it was a bank holiday, and perhaps the rest of the world wasn't working. So what on earth? What am I doing? It's good fun. Yeah, I have a hobby which masquerades as a job, and vice versa. So it's spreadsheet heaven for nerds.
So loads and loads of clubs' accounts out today. I suppose for someone like yourself, Nottingham Forest accounts are pretty interesting, and for fans like us as well, obviously it's of paramount importance. I've been reading the headline figures around, well, it's a pretty eye-watering figures around the wage bill, obviously the transfer expenditure, the money owed on transfers going forwards, and taking out £87 million in loans last year. What's your just general take on the headline figures that we've seen from Forest today?
I think in relation to Forest, the club realised that they were promoted from the Championship with next to nothing in terms of what they had available on the pitch. And therefore, they had two choices. A, they could take an air shot, try to finish 17th, not invest, get relegated, and use the parachute payments to go again. And we've seen that from some clubs historically. Burnley did it, I think, the first time they were promoted around about 2012-13. It could be argued that Sheffield United had taken that approach this year and so on. More than likely, you're going to get relegated under those circumstances. It's very rare that a club come up and not spend. So Forest took the alternative approach, which was to go in large with regards to the investment in players. The wage bill is pretty high. In fact, it's very high by first season back standards. Spending almost £200 million investing in players. How good those players are, that's for a football discussion. I just look at it from a financial point of view. They didn't recover much in the form of player sales. So whilst it's fantastic to see your income go from 30 million to 150 million pounds, I think people will be taken aback by the fact that the losses increased at the same time. And that was in relation to the gamble. And you can argue that the gamble came off on the pitch because Forest did well last season. They were in a solid position, as you know yourself. But that comes with consequences in terms of PSR and the Premier League's naughty step.
Just on the borrowing of the £87 million, I know other clubs have done this. Leicester have borrowed against fees to fund stadium, training grounds, stuff like that. Is that something to be worried about, or is it fairly commonplace in football?
No, it's very common. Liverpool did it when they sold Coutinho to Barcelona, and nobody says that Liverpool are a football club in dire straits. Leicester have done it on a regular basis. They did that with the sale of Fofana. They did that with the sale of James Maddison, and so on. So what we have in modern day football is that if you are selling a player on a multi-million-pound deal, the chances are that the buying club doesn't have that physical cash to pay you immediately. So therefore, you agree an instalment deal process. And Spurs in particular, when they're buying, like to play on the drip. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's very, very common as far as football is concerned. And Forest have done it themselves quite significantly over the course of the 22-23 season. So then the club has an issue. It's effectively got a couple of IOUs sitting in the finance director's office drawer saying, I promise to pay you £15 million in at the end of August 2024 and £15 million at the end of August 2025 in respect of the sale of Brennan Johnson, Love, Daniel Levy. So what are you going to do with those two pieces of paper? You can keep them in your office desk until the due payment, or what we have in modern football is that we've got a number of specialist institutions. I think Macquarie are the most well known, but the likes of Close Brothers and even some of the commercial banks are now dipping their toe into this particular market. And what they'll do is they say, we'll act effectively like a glorified payday loan company. We know that you're going to get that money in a year and in 2 years. We will pay you for those IOUs now, but we're going to charge you a fee, and that fee is 8.5% interest. It's not low, it's not high. I've seen some clubs be charged 12, 13, 14%. I think the fact that Forest are A, in the Premier League, and B, they've got an owner who the market perception is good for it, as it were. That's fine. I also suspect that some of those loans that we have seen, I did point out in the Twitter feed, probably came from the owner as opposed to formal loans from banks themselves.
Okay, interesting. Fans will be interested to know about next season and going forwards. Obviously, Brennan Johnson's sale will be in there. Oral Mangala's gone on loan and likely going permanently. There's still the question of PSR sanctions going next season. What's your take on that? And should we be worried, or will the accounts look better in a year's time?
I think a lot will depend on whether Forest have managed to shift some of that £147 million wage bill off the payroll for this year. They will be allowed to lose more money as for the 3 years ending the 30th of June 2024, because the way that it works is that for each season you've been in the Premier League, you get a £35 million allowance, and for each season in the Championship it's 13. So we've got now two 35s and a 13. So Forest can lose £83 million. They've got the 40 odd million pound profit from the sale of Brennan Johnson. If that's not going to be backdated to 2023, and it looks unlikely, I think we have to be honest there in terms of what we've seen from the first Commission's report, that improves the position further. And as you say, you've got a loan fee. If that is converted into a sale, especially before the 30th of June, I think Forest will be in a stronger position. Certainly, looking at some of the paperwork, they were anticipating a further loss this season in the region of 12 to 17 million pounds, and that will be after those two transactions you mentioned. So they've got a little bit of work to do, but it's not impossible.
And just lastly, before we let you go, a lot of the conversation, I guess, is predicated, and fan hopes are predicated on us staying up this season. If we were to go down, I mean, it's an obvious question, but to what degree is that a disaster for the football club off the pitch?
It's not a disaster. I think your main concern would be, do players have relegation clauses embedded in contracts? I know some of the wages that the players are on. You know some of the wages the players are on. They are pretty high for what you'd probably call a newly promoted club in the Premier League. If there's significant step downs, then the club should be okay. As far as sort of a day-to-day existence is concerned, we know that the owner has been very generous historically, so you see no reason why that shouldn't continue. So I think that's gives you a bit of peace of mind. And also, if you take a look at the clubs who have been relegated last season, and you talk to Southampton fans and Leicester fans and Leeds fans, they're loving it. They're loving it. You know, back in the Championship, you're back to 46 games a season. You are a big fish back in that particular pond, and it does give the club an opportunity to reset and redress. Forest have some very attractive players from a Premier League recruitment point of view, and those players have been at the City Ground now for a couple of years, so their accounting value will have decreased. So you can still sell them, and even if you get a bit more than the original price you paid for them, you'll get a substantial accounting profit built into that. So I don't see it as being a disaster. It's never easy, but you know that's football, and you know I'm sure you have done all of your sums. You'll have looked at the fixtures ahead. I think most people are working on the basis of two clubs that were already effectively down, and it's 1 out of 3 or 4 going forwards.
Right, there we are. Thanks very much to Kieran for his time. I've got no interest in going back to the Championship and loving it personally with 46 games, but I can see what he's saying. So, yeah, thanks to Kieran for that. Just before I throw it to Mikey and Paul for their thoughts, he mentioned the wage bill, which was kind of the figure that grabbed me. So I had a look around the league for comparative figures. So Forest, 147 million. Palace, 123 million. Leicester, incredible, 192 million for the most recent accounts I could find. So no wonder they're in bother as well. Wolves, 142 million. Southampton, 106 million. Brentford, 99 million. And Brighton, I couldn't find a figure, but I saw Kieran tweeted this time last year when they finished 9th, they had the second lowest wage bill in the Premier League. So, Mikey, what's just your general take on that from hearing Kieran and what he told us?
Yeah, firstly, it was nice of him to do that, I suppose, on his day off. So that was good. He spoke really well, really clear, made it quite a complex issue sound almost understandable for people like me who aren't sort of based in finance. I've read so many spreadsheets and numbers over the last few weeks. Honestly, I think my head's going to explode. But the key takeaways I have from it is exactly what you said, Matt. Our wage bill is astronomical. And it's really, you've not been in the league for 20 odd years. You come up and immediately you have a wage bill higher than Wolves and higher than a lot of teams that have, you'd say established Premier League teams that have been in here for a long time. So there's lots of questions around the number of players we bought and are still buying. And I just think there are things that are completely in our control, and one of them is the wage bill. So, he mentioned around our anticipated loss of, what did he say, 12 to 17 million. And if you look from where we've come from and the fact that the last window was relatively quiet, it feels to me as if there's now, even if there wasn't before, there's certainly now an understanding of where we're at. There's a clear desire to work now within those guidelines, and it will mean the facilitation of a few people out the door. So I think clubs like us just need to, understand that we are still new to this league. You're not going to go from bottom of the Championship to a top 10 wage bill in 18 months or whatever it's been without having consequences. I just think we need to strip it back a little bit. I was also really interested, if anybody's read this, to look at the income that we get. So it's very, very minuscule for merchandise and season tickets and all that sort of stuff. You're only talking a few million. And then you get the TV money, which is astronomical. So the benefits for staying in this league, the TV money is there's almost an argument to say you can charge almost nothing for your tickets, because it doesn't bring in the amount of money that most people would think it is. So really encourage people to have a look at that, and the TV money just jumps out. But yeah, two things: TV money huge, wages absolutely huge. I'm sure we can dissect it, and I know a lot of us look at some of those players on a lot of money and think, wow, if we hadn't have done that, perhaps we wouldn't be in this situation. But I think we need to learn from it. I think it's eye-watering. I had to read it about 3 or 4 times this morning just to try and comprehend some of the numbers. They're astronomical. But like I said, I think there's now an understanding that we did break the rules. We know what our issues are, high wage budget, and we just need to make sure that we have a smaller, tighter squad, and don't get people on loan, for example, that aren't going to play. It's just mad. So that was my takeaway. It's just frightening. The level of finance is absolutely astonishing in the Premier League, isn't it, compared to the leagues below? But yeah, I think we just all need to reflect on that. I think just eye-watering numbers really are.
Yeah, certainly. I suppose at the end of the season, at least we've got a lot of out-of-contract players. I mean, obviously Harry Hart is one of them, but there are more to come, certainly. So there is an opportunity for a reset, I guess. And I think we do need to change our transfer policy, and hopefully there are positive signs in January and going forwards. What's your take on it, Paul, after hearing that? Are you concerned, or are you hopeful that we've turned a corner in January and we're going to be a bit more streamlined going forwards transfer-wise?
Sure, I actually felt quite reassured listening to what he said. I think it's easy, isn't it, to see the headlines and look at, the losses and so on. But and maybe this is me being an optimist and looking through rose-tinted glasses. But listening to the fact that the borrowing, the 87 million, the 28 million, but the 8.5% that we've done against the Johnson, the money, the fact that that's not uncommon. I think he said, amongst the Premier League clubs. So it doesn't feel like we're doing anything sort of out of the ordinary. I think come back to what you guys said, the wage bill is obviously crucial, isn't it? 140 odd million. I guess it sounds like it compares comparatively with the Wolves wage bill. And going right back to, I think when we got promoted, I remember listening to Nick Randall talking about, we've got 20 odd years to make up for, and we've got to do that in 3 months. And clearly the club has taken an approach that they want to have a go at staying in the Premier League. And I think, if we all take a step back and think of it, we go back to 2 years ago, we're on the verge of, getting into the playoffs, and how would we want to go about trying to stay in the Premier League? And I think we'd probably, the vast majority of us, I think, would kind of concur that we've gone about it in roughly the right way. Probably, a little bit over exuberant at times with some of the signings and the number of signings, but I think by and large it's difficult to be overly critical of the way we've gone about it. Clearly, we the Johnson sale is going to be crucial, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later on. Sales this summer, Murillo, etc., are going to be crucial to maintaining a sensible level balance sheet. But yeah, I think overall, look, we've had a go. It worked last year in terms of staying up. Hopefully, we're in a position we're still in control of this year, and it'll work this year. But you're dead right. We'll have to be a little bit more circumspect going forward. But I think we've seen that already in January this year, and I think everybody now has learned lessons. I think the club, the hierarchy, feels like hopefully they've learned lessons about how to go about trying to be a Premier League club. Obviously had some rude awakenings, points deduction, prime example of that. But yeah, fingers crossed that they've learned from them the mistakes, and we're in a better place going forward as long as we can keep our position in the league. Having said that, again, reassuring to hear that Kieran's view that even if we did go down, it's not a disaster. But let's not go there.
No. I mean, I think I don't know how many players have got relegation wage drops. I hope it's more than I think, because that could be a concern. But I still don't think it'll come to that. I suppose one thing it says to me, Mikey, that we probably did is we've paid Waitrose wages to not necessarily get Waitrose players last year to give us our best shot of staying up. And we've also not had the commercial income of a more established club like Wolves. So it feels again like we've tried to jump a few extra rungs on the ladder. We sort of got stung, but I do think it worked overall if we stayed up. But it's what we do from here, I think, is probably the big question for me, and how we react to it, I guess. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm glad you used. I work in retail. I'm glad you didn't use my company. You used Waitrose instead. I don't know what I'd say to that. But yes, yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I was trying to articulate at the start there. I think we went from level 1 to level 4 just straight away. You know, we pushed it, we invested, we were over exuberant, as Paul quite rightly said. But I think there is now a acceptance and understanding of where we are. And I think that was, like I said before, that was reflected in the last transfer window, which was astonishingly quiet by Forest standards. It was very refreshing as well. You know, we targeted a goalkeeper, and that's what we got. That's all we needed. So I'd like to think that there is a more strategical way of working, should I say, going forward. And I believe there will be. You know, I do have confidence that, you know, we all learn lessons from this. But proof will be in the pudding. I think it's when he was talking about Leicester and Southampton fans loving it in the Championship. We spent too much time down there. I think these next 9 games could really define us for the next 5 to 10 years. Honestly, I think the second season is always, if you look historically, it's always really difficult. They call it second season syndrome, don't they? You know, if we can just get over the line this season, combine that with a calmer, more thoughtful approach, like I said, I think we'll be absolutely fine. So, yeah, it's just, you know, you can look back in retrospect, can't you, and say, you know, why did we buy this player? Why have we bought 4 goalkeepers? Why did we need 4 or 5 right backs at the same time? And you can dissect it that way. But I wouldn't go as far as to criticise the desire to upgrade the squad. You know, there's 1 player left from that promotion winning team. You know, the turnover's been absolutely incredible. And we almost needed it, didn't we? Because our best 5 players when we went to were loanees. So we knew it was going to be traumatic to an extent last season. And this season, just the same. I just hope now that we've had a bit of a slap on the wrist. I hope now it's not enough to send us down. Just a more thoughtful approach and just target the players that we need. But we do have to accept where we are. You know, we've been out of the league for so long. We're a Premier League team. But at the moment, until we upgrade the ground, until we look at wider, more commercial investment, you know, because we're going to be based on turnover, aren't we, next season? We don't have the turnover to compete with some of these teams. We just have to be respectful of that, I think, and just understand that, you know, finishing between, I don't know, 15th and 12th for the next 5 seasons will be amazing and fantastic. You know, it's not, being outside the top 10 isn't failure for this club in their evolution. Not from my opinion, anyway. So let's just hope that there's a more sort of streamlined approach going forward, and I do believe there will be.
Could I just say one more thing, Matt? Sorry, just jump
please.
in. That Kieran mentioned, which was the interest rate that we're paying on the thing, and without getting too bogged down into, you know, financial sort of speak. It sounded like what he was saying was that, you know, Forest have got a relatively decent credit rating when it comes to, you know, the lenders who are lending us money, and if we manage to stay up this year, sure, that's only going to get better. In that if we have to do this, if and it sounds like it's relatively common practice that you take out lending against future transfer income. So once we've been in the Premier League for 2 years, 3 years, etc., that credit rating, if you like, is only going to get better, and so forth. We're going to be in a better negotiating position with the likes of, I think he said, Close Brothers and 1 or 2 others that sort of provide this type of finance. So that again was encouraging to hear that, and I think, you know, big kudos to the owner, because it sounds like him standing behind the club clearly gives us that extra bit of security when it comes to, you know, these potential lenders that are lending against this future transfer income. So again, you know, and this is not me blowing smoke up the owner's backside by any stretch, because, you know, as we said, we've been over exuberant, made mistakes, but it's worth remembering that his presence is a big factor in us being able to get that kind of lending at what sounds like, from Kieran's sort of talk, is relatively decent rates. So that's something I think which is going to be crucial going forward as well. Yeah,
I think for me, as long as we've seen the end of like Wang Yi-Zhou and Josh Bowler type signings, where you look at it and think, well, when's that guy going to play? I think we need, if we can make targeted signings and have windows like January, then I'm much more hopeful. When Paul you were talking about loans, thinking like Derby and Southampton, who took out loans at like 20% loan shark interest rates. I think it's at MSD Holdings or something. I might be wrong about that. I'll have to Google it, but it's certainly not that level. Just before we move on, a couple of people to thank. some of these YouTube names. Dubbers for becoming a member, really appreciate that. And AJ for the $1.99 donation. That's very kind of you as well, AJ. Thank you very much. We'll move on to talk about Spurs game moving at just ridiculously short notice. But before we do, you can get your tickets for our live show Thursday, April the 11th. The link is in the description. So if you haven't already, do get those. It'll be a good night, I'm sure. Mikey's there, Lewis, Fletch, Temps, Pete and Emily will be there as well. So come along and say hello. It'd be good to see as many people there as possible. And also Trent Navigation, obviously our main sponsor. So you can win tickets for a game at Trent Bridge in the T20 Blast this summer. Just join their fantasy Premier League. The league code for those who are listening, not watching, is lowercase. This is all lowercase. LY4UG8. LY4UG8 to get your name in the hat. I've signed up myself. So see how many people sign up, and it'd be good to have some FPL fun. I have this week. I'm on Wildcard to liven up the international break. Mikey's shaking his head. Why?
Because I'm surprised you've got any chips to use, so to speak. I think I've used all mine. I've joined that league as well. My team's awful. I think it's worse than yours.
I've saved all mine. I didn't free hit last week either. Is this going over your head, Paul, or do you play?
No, I play as well. I've got bench boost left. I haven't used that yet. I've used my other two. A bit over exuberantly, bit Marinakis-esque really, probably earlier on in the season. I could have saved them, but I do play.
Very good, very good. Well, I've saved mine, and hopefully it works, but we shall see. Right, Spurs game has been moved to it's next Sunday, isn't it? I should have written all this down, to a 6 p.m. kickoff, bringing it forward a day because of tube strikes in London. Ridiculously short notice. What's your take on it, Paul? You're going to be there. Are you pretty narked by it or not?
Yeah, I am. To be fair, I think the tube strikes were announced last Thursday, I think, if I remember rightly. So, look, I think from a Tottenham, I think it's driven by Tottenham, isn't it? The change rather than us.
And Sky probably, yeah.
And probably Sky. I mean, I guess they must have more than 50%, probably 60-70% of their regular attendees will be using the tube network to get to the game. So, as soon as that was announced, I guess, could they have been in consultation with the unions a bit earlier? Does that even happen? I don't know. It feels like it's probably the only. It was always going to, once that tube strike was announced, it was kind of the only possible outcome was going to be a change of some sort. Obviously, from fans travelling down from Nottingham 6 o'clock on a Sunday night, probably not. It's not very helpful, as I'm sure the 8 o'clock Monday night wasn't either. I mean, for me personally, living down this way, I'm sort of southwest London based, so I was going to drive had it been on the Monday night. Now it's a Sunday, I probably will get the tube. So, from a personal perspective, it may have helped a little bit. It means I can have a beer rather than not at the game. But apart from that, yeah, I get the frustration absolutely for fans that are particularly travelling down from Nottingham. But I don't necessarily think there's maybe any other option than having to rearrange it. It's just an unfortunate set of circumstances, I think, that's happened in a short space of time, so close to the game, that means that, whatever they would have done, there's going to be a set of unhappy people on both sides of the fence from a fan's perspective, I think.
Damon Hazel, thank you very much. £5. Have a pint down the nav. Yeah, I shall tomorrow. I shall be there tomorrow. So thank you very much for that, Damon. Mikey, what's your take on it? Is it more the timing, because it's such short notice that it's not uncommon to move games, but it's just so close to the match now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I feel for everybody who's booked hotels down there and maybe got the day off work, and my mate took the day off work to go, and now he's obviously had to change that. So it is unfortunate. I guess there'll be the thinking behind it. I understand, but my question would be, and I don't know the answer to this, just why did it take them so long to decide? So, Paul, if you're right, and this tube strike's been out there and understood, and it's taken them a week?
Best part of it, I think, yeah. I
mean, that's just, for me, that feels totally unacceptable when people have very busy lives. Tottenham isn't up the road from Nottingham, which is, a lot of people will be travelling from Notts to it. So it's a hell of a journey. And like I said, they would have had to change their life around to do it, to follow the club they love. I just don't know why it's taken a week. That's all I need to understand, is that why did it take so long? Because transport in this country is pretty poor at the best of times. But usually you do get a bit of heads up. I've been to a few away games this season where the trains haven't run, but you always get those few weeks to just plan and to plan around it. And I feel for the people that have planned and then I have to rip that up and plan again. So I just hope they come out and say, look, it took this long because of X, Y, and Z. And once we understand that, then it makes it a more palatable decision. But regardless, they'll still have great backing. And let's hope we can go there and get something and make all this pain worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a rumor that was floating around for a couple of days as well.
Yeah.
So it was obviously in the pipeline. So you're certainly right there. Right, this podcast was supposed to just be a Q&A answering submitted questions, and we're 30 minutes in and we haven't touched on a single question. So we're going to go through as many as we can and try and leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end for people in the chat to drop questions in as well, if anyone's got any. So we shall rip through them. Some good questions submitted. Some of them are kind of similar to before, previous shows, which is fine because it shows people are asking them. So we'll go through those. First one from PJH on Twitter. Will Nuno be manager next season? I have my doubts regardless of what league we find ourselves in. It's a bit of an ever-moving picture because we did discuss this previously. What's your take on it, Paul, as we sit here right now?
Well, I guess firstly, I very much hope we stay in the Premier League next season. And if so, I'd personally like to see him given a full pre-season and I guess hopefully an opportunity to shape some sort of squad he feels he can work with. I mean, obviously a lot of what he can do in that regard is going to depend on, I guess, the probable sale of Murillo and hopefully a sell-off of some of the excess deadwood that we're carrying on the books. But I think we've got to view his tenure so far in the context of not just the results, but also, what else he's had to contend with. So he's had the background noise about the points deduction. He's had AFCON disruption. And, not that we should constantly hark on about it, but, a few refereeing faux pas, shall we say, that probably haven't helped our cause. So, that's not to say he's devoid of any criticism, for some of the selections, tactical decisions he's made. I guess because he's made some questionable calls, I think, we probably all agree on that. But I suppose, when you're working with a brand new squad midway through his season, as he's had to do, naturally he's going to make some mistakes along the way. I guess my hope is now that, especially after he's had this international break, he's had a good opportunity to, I guess, take stock and is hopefully a bit more confident in his own mind of what his best 11 is from for the rest of the season from those that are available. I think hopefully that gives us consistency of selection and crucially consistency of performance. Really, that we do what's necessary to stay up. I guess on the other hand, as the question is, if we go down, I feel that probably both parties, Nuno and the club, are going to both be looking for a fresh start.
Yeah, I mean, if it looks like we're going to go down, I suspect the decision might be taken out of his hands in an act of desperation. So we'll see. I mean, I know, Mikey, like me, you haven't been overly enamoured with his tactics and team selection in the last 3 away games. How are you feeling about it? As we sit here right now, I think it's a moving picture, really, and can change after one win. But how do you feel right now?
Yeah, I think Paul articulated it really nicely. I think I'm yet to be convinced, if I'm honest. That's where I am. That's where I'm at. I think in recent games, particularly the stuff that's in his control. So, Paul mentioned there are things outside of his control, which I empathise with. I totally understand that. However, I'd say that he's not the only manager that had to deal with some of this stuff. But the stuff that was in his control, I think his own performance, this is my own opinion, is not where I'd have liked it to be personally. Because some questionable decisions, which I think have directly led to us losing points. Also, not been too impressed with some of the media that's been done. I think it's easy to just compare to the previous manager who, a bit like me, would just speak forever and ever. But he understood that a forum like an interview, radio interview, TV interview, was his way of reaching the fans and getting his message across. So we over-egged it quite a lot. I just listen to Nuno sometimes on the radio and TV and just think he'd rather be anywhere, sweeping chimneys, like anywhere, rather than doesn't necessarily, place as much emphasis on that and what it means to me personally and to I know a lot of fans that I speak to that actually want to hear his thoughts, want to hear why he made that change, want to hear what his thinking was behind some team selections or what his thinking was for team shape. And he doesn't really, at the moment, give us that. So you then begin to lose a bit of faith, and we've won once in the league this year, got 4 points, I think. our form's awful. We've got 9 games to save our season. I just think everybody has to raise their game, everybody, starting with him. So to answer your question, I agree that if we go down, he won't be here. And I think the draw is still out for me. Hopefully I'm completely wrong. And we show up tomorrow and put on a West Ham type performance, turn Palace over, and it's the team that played Newcastle and Man United that turn up for the rest of the season. In which case I'll hold my hands up and say, do you know what? He knows his best team. We're playing fluid. His media, his tone of voice and his mood will get better. Therefore, his media might get a bit better. And I'll step back and go, yeah, I was probably a bit harsh. But where I'm at right now is I'm not too impressed. I think it's probably the kindest way of saying it.
I think for me, so I don't mind his media thing as much, although I do see what you're saying. But I feel like he's this is a bit of a 9-game job interview for him still with the owner. I think because we know the ambitions of the owner, and I don't think limping over the line to finish 17th, which I would massively take personally right now. I still don't know if the owner will accept that. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens. Will he extend, it's not a case of extending his contract. He's got a contract, but will he stick with him or will he look elsewhere? I think if we finish this season quite well and we win 5 games or whatever, without doing that whole points tally again in my head, then he probably will be here. And I think Paul's right. He's had a very tricky hand dealt to him, but I think Mikey's right, and he hasn't always played it very well. So I think it's a bit in the middle of all that, and we'll see what he does. But I think, yeah, jury's still out in terms of the long term is probably a fair way of putting it. But as I've said here so many times, I wish we could go back to the Newcastle and Man United performances when the handbrake was off, and if we see that starting against Palace with these next three of the next four games at home, then I'll be quite happy if we start winning games. Like every fan, if we win games, then stay Nuno. That's fine with me. But I think he's having a bit of an audition himself at the moment. Right, let's go on to the next question from Brian Clough 7 on Twitter. It's about Gio Reyna. Why hasn't he been given an opportunity? Surely he has to be better than Origi. It baffles me. Origi's been okay, but zero end product. We desperately need an end product. I kind of picked this question out, Mikey, because it is around the end product thing, I think, for me. Of Origi has looked fine, but we haven't seen that end product. The other wingers we kind of have, and we haven't really just seen enough of Reyna. He's coming off a good international break. Do you want to see more of him now?
It baffles me too. What a great question. I don't know. It goes back to my point just then. If we understood maybe a bit of the thinking of the manager, we might be more receptive to some of the decisions that he's been making. As for Gio Reyna, Greg is obviously a big fan of him, obviously with being at Dortmund. But he's right what he says. Every time I see him play, either for them or for USA in this break, he looks the business. He looks like he can beat a man. He looks like he can offer something. His final ball's good. He's energetic. He can play more than one position. And so you're thinking there must be a role for him at Forest in this running. There has to be. I think he came out himself and said, he was sick for a few games. There was a few other. So let's just say that led to him maybe not featuring as much as we like. There's no excuse now. We're in awful form. He's in form himself. He's come here to play and to impact and to showcase his talents in the Premier League. And we are a struggling team that's in need of a bit of a spark. So without digging out Origi, I have no idea why he's in that team at the moment when you've got Callum Hudson-Odoi sat on the bench. Don't understand it at all. So I'd love to see Reyna feature a lot more. Be that off the bench. Like I said, he can play in either position. You've got Elanga, Hudson-Odoi, Origi, Gibbs-White, Reyna, got Ribeiro. There's lots of attacking talent there. Chris Wood, Taiwo when he comes back. There's loads of opportunity there. For somebody to make an impact. And I just really hope that he's not one that we look back in a month's time and just forget he ever played, came to us because he's played 5 minutes. And there's definitely a player there. And like Temp said, I think on a previous show, Origi's not scored a Premier League goal for 2.5 years. So it's not as if he's ripping it up and scoring every week and beating his man and looking like the business. So I think I'd love to see him feature against Palace tomorrow. I think he might make an impact off the bench initially. But I'd love to see the starting lineup tomorrow. I just hope he thinks, do you know what? This is my best team. I'm going to play it for 9 games. And I think that doesn't include Origi, and it probably has Reyna featuring somewhere, probably starting off the bench. But yeah, got to see him. He's a talent. The teams around us would love to have him on the bench. I can tell you that for sure. So let's hope we see him tomorrow.
There was an article in Athletics today by Paul Taylor and one of his colleagues just saying that Rayner's fit, and there's no questions against his attitude. I know it's been levelled against him, but it's just that they just don't see a slot for him with Morgan Gibbs-White, such a key man. This show originally was supposed to be with Ruby Naylor, and Paul is a very able deputy, but you are not American, not female, and not 21, I'm afraid, Paul. But I would welcome your take on the front line still and how it's all shaping up around the whole group. What do you want to see?
Yeah, I think if I remember on the whole Origi Rayner piece, I think if I remember rightly, Origi was a bit of a surprise selection, wasn't he? In Nuno's first game against Bournemouth, when he ended up being that sort of sacrificial lamb after Bolly's red card 20 minutes in or so. But I think for me that selection suggested to me that Nuno obviously had a positive opinion of Origi when he arrived. I don't know whether that's possibly from his experience of playing against him with Wolves when Origi was at Liverpool, I'm not sure, but there was obviously something there, it seemed. And I think then Origi got injured over Christmas. He came back for that cup game against Bristol, which just after Rayner arrived, he wasn't eligible. I think Origi scored, didn't he? And that seemed to give him a bit of confidence. And it's before, I think we all said on here, his performance has definitely improved recently, but like you say, sort of limited output in terms of goal contributions. I think he had good chances against Brighton and then at Luton last week spring to mind. I think, but he made a goal for Gibbs-White, didn't he, at Villa, and played a part in that sort of Hudson-Odoi goal against West Ham. So yeah, again, come back, as Mikey said, a really valid question. I guess the only thing I'm not too sure of Rayner, and like as I say, I'm not Ruby, I've not seen enough of him, but I don't know how effective he might be in a wide role. Although, again, having said that, I think most of us probably saw Origi as a central player when he joined, didn't we? So, maybe Origi's physicality is something that Nuno wants to be in the team. But Rayner's clearly coming back from a very successful international break by all accounts. So, he's like to have a lot of confidence behind him. On the back of that, I guess what we have got coming up is we've got 2 games in 4 days and 3 in 8 days if you include Spurs. So I think, as Mikey said, we're hopefully we'll see more than just the odd 5-minute cameo from Rayner over the next couple of weeks, just purely from a squad management point of view, and hopefully that gives all of us, not just Nuno, a proper idea of what he can bring to the team for the running. But coming back to the whole view of the front line per se, I think certainly looking at tomorrow, you've got to go with that front 4 of Wood, obviously in Taiwo's absence, and the 2 wide players, Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, for me, have got to start alongside Gibbs-White. I think that's got to be our template and attack the games that are coming up, particularly the next 3-4 home games, and really make sure that we leave nothing out there. That's got to be the way to go.
Thanks to Russ in the comments. Always nice to hear from a fan. Keith also mentions Ribeiro, someone who hasn't really featured yet. I think we're committed to signing him, which is an interesting one with the FFP discussion that we've had. But obviously a talent scoring in the Portugal under-19s, but I think that's a big gap to the Premier League, which is probably why he hasn't featured much. So he's another player to monitor, certainly. Question from Callum Owen on Twitter as well. Should we stay up? Which areas of the pitch do you think need to improve on to ensure a stress-free season next year? I don't think they exist, Callum. But Mikey, if we can get as close to that stress-free season as we can with a probably pretty limited budget, even if we sell Murillo, I don't think we'll be particularly cash rich. But what areas of the pitch would you want to see improvement on? Yeah,
it's a good question. You're thinking, there's a team that is struggling again, so you think you could pick any. But if you think about it logically, I think there's just been a lot of underperformance this season. That team on paper, and I realise the game isn't played on paper, has some really good footballers in it. So I don't necessarily see an area of the pitch and I think, oh my God, we're completely weak. Even, defending crosses, set pieces, we might talk about that in a minute. But in terms of the area of the pitch, I think for me, it's probably the central midfield. You guys spoke about it the other day as well. I still don't know where I am in my head on it. So every manager that's been at Forest in the last few years has gone back to Ryan Yates and defaulted to him. And we have spent so much money in that area of the pitch. Our record signing is supposed to be an upgrade in that area of the pitch. And we still go back to the academy kid, Ryan Yates. Now, that says an awful lot to me. One, about Yates' attitude and grit and performance and reliability, and managers know what you can get. But also, what does that say about the recruitment in that area? that we've tried so many people, so many combinations, and we always default back. So for me, we've just got to take a step back and look at what we want in that area. Is it a partner for Ryan Yates, or is it a case that Yates is just a bit part player, maybe plays away from home, and you need 2 ball-playing central midfielders, or we want 2 workhorses to allow the 4 in front of them to press on? I don't know the answer to that, but for me, it's all about the centre of the pitch. Because in the first season, we had, 30% possession because of the way we were set up and we're trying to grind out results. Now that's coming more to a 50-50. So we're gradually getting more control of the ball. And I just think having that knowing who our 2 central midfielders are, our best 2, should be prime in anybody's thinking for me for next season. Because we can debate it. We can talk about Dominguez and Danilo, and Ryan Yates, and Sangare, and dropping Gibbs White deeper and bringing somebody else in. We still don't know. So whoever's brainier than me in recruitment and the manager and his team just need to decide, what do we want in that mix, in that 2? Do we have the personnel now? If so, great. Put them in, stick by them. If not, go recruit in that area. And everything else I think will work out, because I think our forward line, I always expect us to score goals. We've got some dynamic, young, quick talent. And I think even defensively, I know we can't defend crosses, but defensively our stats are actually pretty decent. And I think we've got a half-decent goalkeeper now. So yeah, for me, Matt, it's central midfield, 100%.
I think the answer might still be in there, in those 4. It's for those players to show it. I hope between Danilo, Dominguez, and Sangare, there's a front line 3 starters. I think I got into a bit of a thing on Twitter about Ryan Yates because saying we were Yates apologists, but every manager keeps picking him. I mean, they're not Yates apologists, are they? I think that for me, Ryan Yates shouldn't really be a regular starter in the Premier League if we're going to get to where we want to be. He's a player with a ceiling, and he's probably the only one of the 4 midfielders that sort of plays near it consistently. And I think if we find consistency in the 3 we've got, then I'll be quite happy. For me, it's probably centre half, because I think we might touch on Murillo. I think Murillo will probably go. So it's going to be Omobamidele and another for me. And is it going to be Willy Bolly, or do we recruit? And I think we probably recruit. And if we nail that, someone who can help make us better at defending set pieces, that's probably the one big area for me is central defence. What about you, Paul?
I think between the 3 of us, we've got it sorted. So I don't disagree with anything either of you said. But I guess I'll answer this on the proviso that Gibbs White's still with us next season, because I think if not, replacing him is obviously going to be a huge priority and albeit a very difficult task. I guess I'll also assume like you said, Murillo is going to leave, and hopefully that gives us some funds to invest. I think for me, I'm not convinced that the goalkeeper situation is fully resolved. Having said that, I didn't watch it, but it sounded like Sells had a decent game against England the other night, and the fact that he's getting picked for Belgium, suggests that he's obviously got some good credentials. But I think we'll probably see some turnover in that department. I think the second area for me would probably be at the top of the pitch. I mean, I love Taiwo, and I really hope he can have some sort of better luck on the injury front. But based on the evidence of this season and last season, we're probably going to need some more depth there. I mean, obviously got Chris Wood, who's proved to be a really, a very adequate backup this season. But I think his deal expires in the summer. I think he's 32 now, and he's not without his own injury issues, as we've seen in recent weeks. And I think he's on big wages as well. So, no question mark, will he still be with us next year? So I guess for me, goalkeeper, striker, and probably a wide player. I think, Elanga, beyond Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, and we've talked about Origi and whatnot, but I think beyond those 2, we're probably a little bit light. I guess the obvious other improvement, which doesn't involve sort of personnel change necessarily, is to be better at defending set pieces. But I think for me, that's probably as much to do with constant changes in selection at the back as much as anything else. So, I think one thing what will definitely help us improve is a more settled back 4 next season, even if that is likely to be without Murillo. So, I think between us we've got goalkeeper, central midfield, wide players, and strikers sorted out. The fullbacks, I think, sounds like we're happy with, but everything else we all want to change. So, again, that this just throws into the perspective the challenge that the owners and recruitment team have had in the last couple of years. Everybody wants to change something different, don't they? So, if we all had a money tree, we'd probably buy a new team every year, but we know we don't have that. So, be interesting to see what we prioritise for sure.
It is ironic we've said we need to have a very restrained transfer window, and we've all just suggested entirely different areas of the pitch. But I do agree. I think we probably do need another winger, even if it's as a backup. But then you would hope you could find someone on a decent budget for that. I would imagine. I'd be very happy if it's Elanga and Hudson-Odoi as our starting wingers
Oh,
next season. I think we'd be on a good track. So, sort of leading on from that, Mikey, around Taiwo, lads at the Miss Rolling In podcast says, a heartbreaking one. If someone came in for Taiwo, would you be okay with him going due to his record? I mean, would anyone take him, I suppose, is the question, at the fee that makes it worthwhile because of his injury record?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? I think a fully fit Taiwo that's playing 80-90% of the season attracts a lot of suitors. And, you know, that's a good thing because teams are after your players. It means you're doing well and scoring goals and lighting up the league. I think for Taiwo, it seems to me like he almost pushes himself a little bit too much. So when he came on, I think it was against one of the last home games where he really struggled to run. He tried to sprint it and he couldn't push off and he couldn't run. And that's really scary. That suggests there's something, not just the fact that he's just not had minutes and he's not fit. That suggests to me there's something possibly seriously wrong there. So I think Nuno's come out and said that he has got. I think he actually said the word serious injury, didn't he? So I don't think it's a discussion or a possibility for the short term until he gets himself fit and back in the team and scoring goals. But like I said, a fully fit Taiwo was an absolute handful for anybody. You know, there was serious rumours of Chelsea sniffing around him in one of the previous transfer windows. I mean, they sniff around everybody, so it's not a general thing. But you know, they were looking to sort of upgrade in the striker position. So I just hope it works out for everybody. He gets himself fit, he gets rid of this niggle or whatever he's got, and he gets back in the team and starts scoring some goals for us, because then if we do sell him, it'll be for a huge profit and he'll get a great move, and we can then obviously rinse and repeat and get somebody else in. But no, we're going to miss him, aren't we? I'm just really glad that Chris Wood is back in the team and stepped up, because I think he's going to be instrumental in keeping us up. But yeah, Taiwo, teams will come in for him if he's banging the goals, but he's got to get himself fit.
Pat mentions Niakate talking on about defenders. I was discussing this in the members community tab as well in the week about how he's drifted out of the picture. I think for me, he's just consistency of performance, like so many of our players. Like, was it the Man U game at home? He was brilliant, but then since then he's just too up and down, and he's quite a similar profile player to Omobamidele for me, as in terms of a good athlete who's decent on the ball, but I think Omobamidele's better on the ball, so that's probably why he's ahead of him. But he's another player with a challenge, because I don't see him leaving in the summer. So there's going to be an opportunity for him to replace Murillo potentially, I guess, which leads us on to a Murillo question, Paul, if I can find it. Oh, yes, from Nomad1865, who I see is in the chat as well. Good evening to you. Would you willingly sell Gibbs White or Murillo to buy a more reliable, in terms of fitness, striker? You've sort of touched on it already. It would be Murillo for you, and would you do that as a sacrifice to invest up front?
Yeah, it's a similar theme to the questions. I think as all said, it's been becoming more and more likely that Murillo is going to be sold, and I don't think it's a case of willingly doing it. So I think it's more a case of just needs must, really. I mean, as for Morgan, I wouldn't personally sell him willingly just to get another striker in. I mean, you know, whoever plays up front is still going to need a supply line, which would obviously take a significant hit if Gibbs White isn't part of it. But you know, hopefully the funds we're likely to get, you know, from Murillo mean that selling Morgan isn't something we have to do. And if we want to strengthen striker-wise, yeah, look, we talked about it before. I guess the one caveat with all this is that that Murillo stays fit between now and the end of the season, doesn't pick up any kind of injuries, and you know, ends up diminishing his sort of value of a saleable asset. I mean, that's I guess a bit of a tightrope that we're walking, really, and similarly we did with Brennan by the sounds of it. But I suppose the ideal scenario is that, you know, we get enough points to be safe with a couple of games to go, and then we've got the option at least to wrap Murillo in cotton wool and ensure we get sort of top dollar for him when the big boys come knocking in the close season.
Yeah, I would sell Murillo. I've said this before. I'd sell Murillo before Gibbs White, reluctantly, because I don't want to sell either. But I think realistically, one of them's going to go, and it's probably Murillo. Yeah, I mean, he's got a really high ceiling, but he's actually made a few errors this season. He is a developing player, but he's going to be a star. But I think he's actually easier to replace than Gibbs White, even though Murillo's going to be a better player long term for me personally. Mickey asks a good question that leads into a nice chance for me to plug this week's interview with the head of Forest Academy, Chris McGuire, who took over from Gary Brazil last summer when Gary Brazil left when his contract wasn't renewed, about what's happening with the much vaunted youth system. I don't see any type of conveyor belt going on. We've got a couple of strikers in the youth team that should be getting first team action by now. I don't know if they should. I know there's some talent there in Isapa Asong and Dale Taylor's out on loan. I think that for me the step up to the Premier League is just extraordinary, and managing those players to get there is the big challenge. But we've got Joe Gardner and who was the left back, Mikey? Josh Powell.
Powell, yeah,
who was sort of bubbling away, and Brandon Aguilera as well. So I'd give them some time, but there's some interesting stuff happening at the Forest Academy that's hopefully going to bring another batch through soon. But finding players at Brennan's level in particular is the big challenge that faces clubs, which kind of leads into another FFP debate that we'll avoid now. But it's pretty tiresome that you have to sell your top talent all the time to the bigger clubs who then probably don't play them for about 5 years. Question from Stu in Canada. Do we think the continuation of conceding the same goals every week, corners and free kicks, is a technical or a mental issue, as it keeps happening and we don't seem to learn? Calvin Wilson's been interesting on this. Mikey saying it's about player responsibility and doing your job more than having a set piece coach. It kind of suggests it's more of a mental issue. I don't know. It does keep happening, doesn't it? That's saying the one against Luton was just so poor. Like Felipe doesn't really get off the ground and Sangare loses his man. It's a painful continuing theme all season, isn't it?
It's nice to know that people in Canada are getting riled up about this as well. Like it's not just us. Yeah, it's so frustrating. Every time I come on here, I talk about the goals that we concede, and they're just the same goal. It's either a set piece or a cross and a free header. So I think it's so frustrating. I think the answer to the question is it's a bit of both, isn't it? So it's like anything, it's just the shades of grey. I think Kelvin is obviously primed to comment on this, being a defender and training day in, day out, and he knows what it takes to do that well and to head across. But I think if you look at the numbers, what was it, 19 set pieces we've let in? And that doesn't include all the crosses that just come in from open play. And I was casting my mind back before we started this, just to the last 10 games. And it's, barring West Ham, it's every game. Every single game. It's either a set piece or a cross. And, if teams are whacking it in from 30 yards or doing 1-2 passes and ripping us open, there's not really much you can do about that. But this sort of stuff, if you watch League One highlights on ITV, that's every goal you see on there. So we're letting in some really poor, I know Gary says avoidable goals. They really are. Like marquee player from a set piece. So I think it is a mental thing. Of course it is, because you get designated markers or areas to attack, and if you do your job 99 times out of 100, you'll clear the ball. And we're obviously the worst at it in the league. I think the second biggest team that have conceded the most, I think, have conceded 14, and then it's 12. So it's significantly worse than any other team in the league. And this is just set pieces. It's just doesn't include the normal crosses in the open game. So it's a bit like penalties. When people say, it's a lottery, penalty shootout, not having that. I don't buy that at all, because it's a technique and it's a skill. And that's why people practice over and over again. And I think the same can be said with defending and attacking set pieces. So it's where you deliver it. It's the rigor and routine of training over and over again. If that play makes that run, what do I do? If the ball goes in here, what do we do? So there's that part of the technicality of it, which is done through training and routine and repetition. But then it's about, as Kelvin said, individual responsibility. And we're obviously awful at both of them, because we're dreadful defending and we look absolutely toothless. When most teams get a corner and you get that ripper around the crowd, you don't get that at Forest now. Everyone just goes, because you know what's going on. We're not going to score. So I just think that is something that's fundamentally within our control. Like I said, teams aren't ripping us apart. It's daft, stupid, soft goals. So I just really, really hope, and I said this to Lewis off camera the other day, I just really hope that they're just staying behind doing training on set pieces. Or the training is actually, instead of these 5-a-sides, we're just going to do an hour on defending crosses and heading it out. And it sounds really archaic, I know. But until we get it right, it has to be our number one focus. Because if we lose tomorrow 1-0 from across, I think I'm just going to explode. Because it has to stop, because we're beating ourselves. So yeah, the answer is a bit of both, but it's something we are dreadful at, and we have been this season. It needs to end.
Yeah, they've had 2 weeks to work on it. Sorry, Paul, go on.
I was going to chip in, and I know we've talked about this, Matt, before, but for me, the key it's about consistency and selection or lack of it. I mean, I talked about this last time when I was on members pod, but 29 games this season had 14 different goalkeeper and centre-back combinations. That's before you even look at full-backs, which we know have had a huge turnover there as well. So whether that be 2 centre-backs in a back 4 or 3 centre-backs, we've used 14 different goalkeeper central defender combinations. So with that inconsistency in selection, it's no wonder that people, they're not playing as a unit, not training as a unit. If you think of Nuno or whoever, or Cooper, both of them, pick their team 2-3 days out from the game, you'd think you do, as you said, Mikey, you practice those, defending those set pieces in training. But if it's a different combination every other week, you're going to struggle. And ironically, and I bet if you ask the members to write, very few people would get this. There's only one goalkeeper and centre-back combination this season that's got 100% win rate, and that is Murillo and Niakate at centre-back and Turner in goal. They played both that trio played the Newcastle and Man U games, and that's the only time they've all three played together all season. Now, I'm not suggesting we play those three tomorrow, but it just goes to show that we've had such a turnover, and it's no surprise that set pieces in particular as a result are a real challenge. So for me, it's all about consistency between now and the end of the season. I think all of you on yesterday's pod went with Murillo and Bolly, and obviously Sells in goal as that trio. So for me, that feels like the right combo, and I think we've just got to do everything we can to stick to that between now and the end of the season, obviously injury permitting, and give us that consistency and the best chance of repelling those kind of situations and stop conceding in that way.
This isn't a member stream. You're talking to the masses, and there's like.
I appreciate that now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I did say that last time. But this time, I think it's just good to get that point out there, because I think it's really, I don't know any other clubs, of course, what they've had, but you'd imagine that no club in the Premier League has got that kind of turnover in that position that we've had.
True. Right. We've got one more question. If anyone's got any questions, do drop them in, and we'll tackle 5 more minutes at the end. If anyone in the chat wants to ask us anything before we depart, because the clock is ticking. We've already done an hour, so good to have so many people with us so consistently. James Bogue asks, what happened to the team that beat Newcastle and Man U? Is it confidence, or did AFCON completely scupper us? And I'll kind of add to that, Mikey. Did Nuno retreat? I don't know what the word is. Has he gone into his shell a bit around team selection and tactics? That was why I wanted to take that question. What's your take on what's happened since those halcyon days of around Christmas when we won a couple of matches?
Yeah, what a great question. Oh, blimey, if we knew that, we'd demand to see the same again. I guess what we see every week is a team that can score a goal, it's good going forward, but it's the same mistakes and letting them down at the back. What we saw in those 2 games was a team that was on the front foot, that dominated the ball, even away at Newcastle. I thought we were fantastic, and we took our chances. And for whatever reason, and I guess you could say we've retreated into our shell, I think we have. It summed it up for me, the Luton performance, because let me just try and compare the two. So people can remember Newcastle away. We were 3-1 up, and he brought Joe Worrell on and went to a back 5 with about a minute or 2 to go. So that was, we're going to try and get a 4th. We're in control of this game. They don't really look like scoring. I'm not going to close up the shop until right at the end. And that was like, wow, front foot. I couldn't disagree with any of that. If you think what the manager did at Luton, which we were 1-0 up, in control of the game, Luton hadn't got out their own half for ages. And then he takes both the strikers off, puts the defensive midfield up front, brings Felipe on, and goes to a back 5, and invites pressure on. So we didn't do that at the start of the run, did we? At the start of the year and the back end of last year, we wouldn't have done that until right at the end. So something's fundamentally changed. I understand the magnitude of the Luton game, absolutely, but that just seemed ultra negative. That seemed like another manager was in charge, not the one that was in charge of Newcastle and Man U. And my only hope, and I think this is what guys getting out of the question, is that we are just front foot. So if we're 1-0 up with 10 minutes to go tomorrow, let's not go to a back five. Let's not put a defensive midfielder up front and sit back and just hold on for dear life. Let's just be positive, because our best players are our attacking players. I'd much rather see us trying to get a second and maybe get caught than to just invite pressure on. Everybody's really, really nervous. And then obviously the inevitable happens, which is we concede because we struggle to defend crosses, and they've got a big lad called Mateta up front that will just keep pumping the ball to. So I don't know what's changed. I think it's part mentality, it's nervousness, it's the perilous position that we're in. But I just hope, like you said, Matt, I think you touched on a really interesting point about 10 minutes ago when you said, let's hope this break has just served to reset a few people, including the manager and the coaching staff. And just remember what we did at the back end of last year and early this year when we were front foot and aggressive and tried to score goals, because we're a bloody good team when we do that. So let's just hope that that team is going to be the one that we see in the last 9 games. Sorry. So yeah, don't know, but we just got to be aggressive and attack games. Temp said it yesterday. Got to attack games. That's exactly what we need to do.
John in the comments mentioned about Ola Aina coming back tomorrow and starting. I think that might be right. I wouldn't be surprised at all, which I would welcome. Nothing against Toff, but I think we've missed Aina. I think we've actually missed Tavares in an attack, which I never thought I'd say at one point, but he probably has been a miss for us going forwards. James always asks, why do we always present 4-2-3-1 for our team selections in previews? Just because I think that's what Nuno's going to play. I would never predict he'd play 3 in midfield against Brighton, and I wish he hadn't. There was a question or a comment earlier from Graham Ashby. What's MGW done this season? I don't see any progression at all. What do you think about that, Paul? Have we seen him change gear in the right direction, or has he been on a par with last season or even worse?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I guess a lot of, again, come back to when he was playing under Cooper, he was playing out wide left, wasn't he? And I think that, I think we all agree that sort of blunts his, his impactfulness. Since Nuno came in, obviously Nuno, again, we've all said it's a similar theme, isn't it? That first few games where, he sort of released the handbrake and Gibbs White was given that 10 role and he really sort of flourished, the Newcastle, Man U games. We saw what he can really do. And I think, Gibbs White's sort of performances are very much sort of bellwether for the rest of the squad, isn't it? When he's on song, the whole sort of thing seems to knit together. Very rarely does he have a really good game and we don't get a result. So he is crucial. And again, this comes back to why I think we need to do everything we can to keep him in the team and get a good tune out of him, because we've seen it. We know what he can produce. And I think, coming back to tomorrow, if Nuno makes a positive selection tomorrow, if he's got Gibbs White, has got Alanga and Hudson-Odoi either side of him, and he's got Chris Wood up front, I think we could see his confidence and the whole squad's confidence come back pretty quickly. I think if we get an early goal tomorrow, that'll be massive, not just for the team but for the crowd as well. Longer it stays 0-0, or God forbid if we went behind, then tension's just going to build and that's going to challenge all the players' confidence. So I think Gibbs White's crucial. I think everybody needs to stay positive, and if you're going tomorrow, just help inject that positivity into the players. And I think I'm confident that'll yield a positive result for us tomorrow.
Yes, I think we'll sort of move on to any other business there then, because one of my things was I am going tomorrow and I'm looking forward to it. Taking my daughter, who was there for the Man U game, so hopefully she's the lucky charm, the inverse to my wife, who I took to the Sheffield United playoff game in 2003 and told her she could never come back. So she's not been since.
Shall I tell you one game I took my wife to, Matt? Yeah,
please.
3-2 defeat away to Woking in the LDV Vans Trophy.
Oh my word.
Rock bottom.
In 2005, she's never been again either. First and last time. So I know yours is bad, but Christ, that was pretty dire.
Is that the worst defeat in the history of the football club in terms of lowest opposition lost to? It might be. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a good question. But I shall be there tomorrow. I shall be at the Trent Navigation before the match, so do come and say hello. I know Mikey will be there and Greg will be there. and Mark Southerns will be there as well. So if you're around, come and say hello. It'd be good to see as many people as possible. And just quickly as well, like I said earlier, get your tickets to the live show Thursday, April the 11th, 7 p.m. start. I promise it'll be a good night because they always are. £1 from every ticket goes to Maggie's Nottingham, a charity that really helped Temps when his wife was diagnosed with cancer. It really helped his family, so it'd be good to support them as well. Mikey, anything you want to add before we depart?
Yeah, just one thing, if that's okay. So on the week that we obviously lost one of our greatest ever players, one of our miracle men, Larry, I know the club are doing something tomorrow to mark that and to show and pay respects. I'm sure everybody will join in with that. Just wanted to mention another miracle man as well. So John McGuire, who's a friend of ours and our family, he's 60 years in football. 60 years. So he's actually at a dinner tonight in Hartlepool with his partner, Anne, and Lindsay, my wife, her mum, going there. And there's a big celebration. I know there's some amazing things with voice notes and videos of all these famous people that have recorded notes from, so I'm sure it'll all come out. But yeah, it just got me thinking, because I think when he was 14, he was playing for a local Hartlepool side that was managed by Lindsay's granddad, and that's obviously how we know him. So 60 years, signed for Hartlepool in 65, I think, Cloughie, and then obviously went to a few clubs, and obviously Forest won the European Cup twice. So it just kind of resonated with me. Obviously, it's a very sad week for Larry and his family, and just comes on the same week that we're recognising another great in John. So I'm sure a load of videos and stuff will come out about that, but I just hope he has a great night tonight. I'm sure he'll be on the phone probably later or on Saturday. But yeah, I'm sure Lindsay or somebody will share some of the outputs from that. So yeah, just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure that, like Mikey said, there'll be some touching tributes to Larry Lloyd as well tomorrow after his passing this week. Hartlepool won today, didn't they, after losing? Was they lost 7-0 in the week or 7-1 or something?
Well, but they did a Forest. They were 1-0 up in the week away at Gateshead, and then they sat back and lost 7-1. So today was a huge result for them. I think they probably just needed that to make sure to secure their safety, because it was looking a bit perilous. But scraped to 1-0 with a penalty. So Lindsay's in the other room. She's relieved. So hopefully they'll stay in the division and can build from there.
Yeah, I only mention it because hopefully Forest can do the same. A turnaround their pretty terrible form, although obviously we never lost any game to that degree. But anything can happen, and I still have lots of faith, certainly. Paul, anything from you before we depart?
Yeah, well, I guess just looking. If anyone's looking for a bit of positivity ahead of tomorrow, I think today is 32 years ago today since we won our last major, well, I call it a major trophy, was the ZDS final at Wembley against Southampton. So if you go on YouTube, you can find the highlights. Won 3-2. I was there. I was 13 at the time, I think. Probably 1 or 2 on the chat were there as well. But yeah, good way to give ourselves a bit of positivity going into tomorrow. Watch the highlights of that game. Scott Gemmell scored a couple of cracking volleys. Kingsley Black, I think, scored the other one. So yeah, get yourselves in a positive mood, watch that, and take that into the game tomorrow, and hopefully that will bring us 3 points.
Hopefully so. Right, we shall leave it there. As ever, if you've enjoyed this, and it's one of our longest streams we've done for ages, do us a favour if you haven't already. Hit like. You can subscribe to the channel as well, become a channel member, and I do read all the iTunes reviews, but certainly hit like. That would be a big help to spread the word with the YouTube algorithm. Really appreciate that if you haven't already done it. Right, I think we shall leave it there. We'll be back tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. A little later, obviously, because I'll be at the game myself. So that's with Chris Aylmer and Greg Oram. And then it's a busy week next week because we've got the midweek game against Fulham. So we're back on Monday with Gary Birtles, who will talk a bit about Larry Lloyd. And we'll talk about Palace, look ahead to Fulham, post-match Fulham on Tuesday, and then back again on Wednesday for a more detailed review ahead of that Spurs game until they move it to 1 a.m. on Thursday morning or something like that at even shorter notice. So, Paul, thank you very much for your company.
No, thanks, lads. Really enjoyed it.
Me too. Mikey, thanks for your time.
Yeah, cheers, Matt. Cheers, Bon. Thanks everybody for joining in on a bank holiday. You're a good bunch.
Yep, certainly are, and an evening stream as well, try and get a slightly different audience, or give people who are around the world in different time zones a chance to catch us live. So that was part of the thinking here. So yeah, Liam enjoyed your debut, Paul. I enjoyed your debut as well. I'm sure you'll be back at various points to come. But have a good evening, everyone. Thanks for your company, like we said. Enjoy tomorrow. Come and say hello. And in the meantime, we shall see you soon.